This is MFG Out Loud. Courageous conversations about sales and marketing for today's manufacturers. With your hosts, Ray Zaganto and Allison DeFore.
Hey, Trailblazers, welcome to another courageous conversation here on MFG Out Loud. We're so glad you're here. Today, we're talking about something that is important just across the board to every organization that exists, and that's upskilling your salespeople.
There you go.
Way to biff that on the intro. And giving them the selling tools that they need, the training, so they can stop selling naked. What is that? We'll get to that in a minute. So the majority of the time, a good salesperson has a wealth of product knowledge, but can they sell? Ray? We see it. It's questionable. Just because you got the skills, don't mean you can sell.
Well, or if just because you've got the product knowledge doesn't mean you can sell. So.
Exactly. So that's what we're going to dive into today. So in this episode, we're going to tee up a courageous conversation with two badass sales trainers to help you. These two guys. They're going to help you understand how you can improve the sales skills of your team and to help you stop selling naked to make sales easier. Again, selling naked sounds weird. We'll get into that in a minute. And trust me, you won't want to miss this. So before I do the intros, one reason salespeople get caught selling naked is they haven't received the formal sales training from the company they're selling for today. This happens a majority of the time, much to my chagrin and those of your customers, right? And this is an easy fix. So that's what we're going to talk about. So that's where these two rock stars come in. Andy Solomon, the one without hair, he has like 90 years of experience in the building supply industry.
Just a few.
Okay, maybe less, but close. And what makes him so valuable to this discussion is he was once a contractor and a customer. So he's like the dream trifecta, right? Of anyone listening, that's why he brings so much to the table. So now he's leading sales training for Associated Materials. They are a manufacturer of building supplies like windows, doors, siding, all that cool stuff that we need and love. And he does so much more with sales there. And they're in the billions with a B. So very successful company. And then we invited our friend Mark Roberts back, the Selling Naked Dude, back to the podcast to give us his data-driven approach to identifying sales skills gaps and prescribing sales training that has the maximum impact in the shortest amount of time. And who doesn't want that? So like I said, rock stars, thank you for being with us. And let's dive into another courageous conversation. Ray, where should we start?
I'm thinking, well, Andy is kind of you're the lead-off hitter today. So, we want to know, give us a little background kind of on your company and sales, specifically working with dealers, distributors, and have you noticed the need for any new sales skills, out there? So giving you some runway there. Let it rip.
Sure. Thanks, Ray. Yeah. So as we mentioned in the intro, Associated Materials is the parent company to several North American manufacturing and distribution companies like Alcide and Gentech. So we basically sell building products to dealers out in the industry, so whether that's builders, remodelers, multifamily projects, et cetera. And, the big thing that we do is obviously support those customers with products that they're offering to their homeowners and trying to make their homeowners and end users happy with the place that they live. But also being able to provide, support as a manufacturer's or distributor's rep to our customers to help their business grow and to help them be able to take more market share in their market and be more successful as businesses. So as far as, what new skills are needed, I think the hot topic of the day, right, would be, hey, how has COVID-19 or coronavirus changed the sales landscape, or how has it changed the landscape of business? So I think that's where we could probably see some of the most change. It's funny, the more things change, the more they stay the same. I think that rings true in a lot of ways. A lot of the same sales skills that worked before are just as important and needed today, except for you need to maybe deliver those in a different way, right? More hands-off approach, more virtual in some instances. And businesses, especially in our industry, have been deemed essential business. So that's good for our industry, the construction industry. Everybody's been able to continue working for the most part. But there's been challenges. So how are you able to help those businesses grow? Well, that's first off, how can you help them stay in business through this as well as to grow? And then I think those skills, being business acumen and how you're able to do that are skills that are needed to be upskilled.
I think it just to kind of tag on to the end there, I thought it was interesting and instructive in the way you described your company and then went to describe the role of the salesperson. You did it in the context of solving your customer, your end user's problem. We're here to help them stay in business, to make it easier to do this. This is what we're solving. Not once did you tell me that, well, we've got the best siding and windows in the world because the R factor. That wasn't what I heard. So I just thought I wanted to point that out, and I'm sure we're going to get into that a lot more. Thank you.
Yeah. Please do circle back to that.
Yeah, no, I noticed that as well. And, I always talk about this, so people are probably sick of it, but making the customer the hero of your story. And I think that you do that very well. And especially coming from a salesperson, sales leader, that really stood out to me when I first met you. So kudos. And on that note, Mark, what do you think? Is the building supply industry unique, or do you see the need to upskill salespeople in other markets too?
Well, I think every market has its own unique characteristics, and that's why having Andy in the role that he's in, he can add a tremendous amount of value at his company, right? Because he intimately understands his industry. But for most industries, like I think have identified in prior podcasts, about 50% of salespeople have never received sales skills. They've received product training. They've received more product training than they're ever going to need or use. But simple things like how to have a great conversation. Andy touched on business acumen. I think it was Florida State that did the research with buyers and said, what do you expect from salespeople today? And the research indicated 85% of buyers said, I expect the salesperson to be able to communicate their product or service and how it impacts my bottom line. But only 15% are. So it's a tremendous opportunity. As the other guest on your program, Ed Wallace, shared, what we need to be is business advisors masquerading as salespeople.
Oh, love that.
And training, it's a Covey principle to sharpen the saw, right? I still take training, and I've been in sales 36 years. So there's always a better way. And I give Andy a lot of credit because he's put together a pretty thorough program for his company.
Awesome. I want to circle back a little bit because Andy, you brought up, hey, the elephant in everybody's room is COVID and what that did. So we acknowledge that there's a training gap that's out there for the majority of salespeople, but then here COVID drops in the punch bowl, and okay, now what? So if you haven't had a lot of training before, what are the top like 2 or 3 things you better sharpen up on right now that are kind of COVID specific to help you be effective? And I guess let both you guys kind of jump on that one. But Andy,
you want to go first?
Yeah, I got two. I got 2 on my mind that I can share. I mean, one I touched on is, now we're a little bit into it, so the fog has cleared a little bit, and maybe some of the confusion has raised, and we've got a more clear picture. But it was really important, and it's always important to be that trusted advisor to your customers, and that's kind of the theme that we're kind of talking about here. What I mean by that is, the product knowledge, there's only so many products out there that truly differentiate themselves on their own. In the building materials industry, the majority of the products are commoditized. So the only way you're going to differentiate or stand out is if you're able to be that advisor to your customer, and if you're able to help them grow their business by being impactful and truly being a difference maker for their business. So I think the key is understanding your industry, seeing what's working for other customers in your industry, and being able to take that knowledge to your customers in a way that's going to help them, grow their business. And the other part to that, we need to touch on here is that we're going to be entering, we're already in it. We've been in it. Now it's kind of forced our hand and kind of expedited the process here. But virtual selling and the need to have the ability to know how to use the technology that's out there, to be able to have conversations virtually, to be able to use that tool in a way that works best for you and works best for your customer, and understanding how they want to use that, if they want to use that in a way. Does that mean I'm going to have this entire sales process virtually? Does that mean I'm just going to prospect and have an initial kind of qualification call virtually, and then we're going to try and meet in person somehow, recognizing a proper social distancing, et cetera? But I think virtual selling and then just understanding your industry and how you can help your customers grow are probably the two areas that your company should be providing training for your salespeople on, and salespeople should be going out and searching and learning on their own as well.
Great. Mark, you had enough time to think that one over?
Well, obviously, virtual selling skills. I created a webinar on this topic. We also have how to build virtual relationships strategically, and then how to do social selling in a digital world. All three of those had to be created in response to COVID. But Andy covered a lot of that. So what I want to challenge people with is, how well are you training your salespeople based on each buyer persona that you speak with? The burden is actually upon you, your product managers, your marketing, and even trainers, to prepare your salespeople to know what buyer personas are they speaking with. Andy shared, a lot of different nuances to his channel, different people that salespeople could be calling on. More important than ever, the messaging for each one of those people needs to be, well, as Allison would say, felt by them. It needs to be something that grabs them. And we also really need to work on the empathy, which is actually something we can train. Andy touched on being a trusted advisor. That would definitely make them stand out. And if you're looking at the rapid acceleration to digital, you had better be providing some industry insights, application knowledge they couldn't find on a website someplace. I just completed another Voice of the Customer project, and we surveyed 326 customers for this distributor. And as much as 50% of their buying process is done before they engage with sales. So we need to teach our salespeople how to take that ball and run with it today. It's a little bit different today. So one of the things I highly recommend is take the time to understand how your buyers are buying. What process are they using? What exit criteria are they using to get to the next stage? And then teach your salespeople what to ask, what to use, what content to use when. And again, have those personalized messages. We owe it to our team to deliver that today.
It's real quick, Mark. I don't know, we've talked about this in other instances before. Isn't there also an obligation to kind of look back in, because for some, that's a big pivot to go from hard charging, sales, pound, knock on the door, hunter, to all of a sudden pivot to be this empathetic advisor type thing. Don't the sales organizations also have to make sure they've got the right people in the right seats?
Absolutely. And the nice thing is you can use science to figure that out. One of the tools I use, I can tell you within 7 days if you have the right people in the right role. Inside sales is kind of a different role. And don't assume that just because somebody maybe has 20 years of outside sales experience, they're going to just pop right in, get on Zoom, and start, making it happen. Actually, the data shows us a totally different answer.
And I wanted to ask Andy two things. When was the last time, and your answer may pleasantly surprise me, when was the last time the marketing team or marketing person came to you and the sales team at any company you've been at and said, please tell us what your experiences are, what's happening today? We want to support you and craft our messages, hopefully, to support that.
Yeah, well, luckily for me, we've got some people in the right seats here recently, and we've been able to do some of that with a new product that we've just rolled out. Previously, I don't think I could say that. I would say that a lot of times marketing just comes up with what they think the market needs or what the salesperson needs, and they come and bring it and provide it to the salesperson, and it might be relevant or not relevant. And, gaining that feedback, what we've done is, we did some industry research during this product rollout, during the product development of this product called Ascend Composite Cladding. And what we've done is we rolled out to the sales team, rolled out to the market. We did a full-on virtual sales training rollout. It was slated to be an in-person rollout by area, but we've had to transition that to a virtual setting. We rolled it out, we conducted those, and then we've scheduled follow-up discussions. Now that you've had this product in your market for X amount of months, what's been your experience? What's been your feedback on the product? What have your customers said? What's been that overall experience? And what do you need now to further support you? And marketing has been on those calls with us, having those discussions with our salespeople. So it's been a really good relationship there.
Well, that's fantastic, and I'm thrilled to hear it. But relating to that, my other question was back to what we were talking about a minute ago, the customer personas, which Mark brought up and talks about often, and I fully believe in that. How many, this is subjective, obviously. Do you think the majority of companies, especially in building materials, actually have customer avatars or personas that they've created, and they really try and speak to John the contractor, Ted the architect? Do you think that these exist, at least from your experience, or do you think that the majority of companies go, yeah, we sell to contractors, it's the guy, usually he's about this age, they're in this part of the country, this is what they like, this is what they don't like, and that's what they go off of? What's your experience been?
The latter. I think that most companies, most salespeople, the majority out there do not sell to the buyer persona. If you're lucky, you might have an ideal customer profile, which is like the overall business or the company. These are the companies that we like to work with, are a good fit for our product. But then if you drill that down, your product, the value that you bring, it means something different to each department in that company, and how you speak to that department and the value that you bring to that department needs to be different. And I don't think that most salespeople speak to that value on an individualized level as far as what's going to be valuable to that department.
So that could be some training that could happen as well, crafting some actual customer personas that are very specific and tied to the actual challenges that these folks are having today. Like Mark talks about, if your unique value proposition, your customer personas are older than 5 months, you're probably going to need to revisit those, right? Based on everything.
Yeah, for instance, just to give you an example, for a larger modeling company, they have an installation or production team, right? And then they have a sales team. Then they have maybe their design team if they're a builder. The value of your product, what that means to the design team, is going to be all about the aesthetics, the colors, all those types of things that might appeal to a homeowner. The installer doesn't really care about that stuff. He wants to know how easy it is to install or how quick it goes on the wall. So those are the types of value that you need to bring and speak to differently to the different people within that business. Those are the buyer personas that I see.
Well, too many times I think marketing will, especially if they're not equipped with, because, sometimes it's a one-person show, and I understand that can be really challenging. But if they're not equipped with the different buyer personas, they tend to, and sometimes even if they do have those, they tend to do like a one-size-fits-all marketing message. Do you see also? Because that doesn't appeal to the contractor, that might appeal to the homeowner, that doesn't appeal to they don't all speak the same language. So I'm glad that you mentioned that, because it's so true.
Yeah. It also, hurts your differentiation. I mean, when you start getting into those kind of generic messaging, what makes you different than the other 6 websites they went to before they engaged? So again, that messaging by persona, in particular with virtual selling, will improve the overall success. The other one is great questioning skills, discovery. By the nature of your questions, you can show you're an expert in something. And I'm finding that, there's a lot of people struggling right now with virtual sales, and they're having a hard time getting a conversation started. They're really comfortable, what I would say, belly to belly selling, right? They're meeting with the contractor. They're maybe having a cup of coffee. This is totally different. And you have a much shorter time constraint. You better be hitting right on or the call ends. So again, just a couple ideas.
I want to circle back to something that came up before, and I'd like to get your perspective from both of you. Mark, you'd mentioned that you can train for empathy. You can train for skills in that area, which I find interesting, because that at a gut level, you kind of think, well, that's something your mom and dad teaches you growing up. It's a soft skill, and you either have it or you don't. And by the time you get to our point, it's like, well, So I'm interested in your perspective on that. And then Annie, I'd like to hear, as a practical matter, getting that deployed into the field. How do you see that? So, Mark,
you can equip people with tools. For example, in one of my webinars, I talk about people first, product second. Mm-hmm. When COVID first hit, where salespeople were really not resonating is they were immediately going into the pitch as if nothing ever happened. Right away, now I feel like a number, right? So I taught them some very basic questions, and this is back in late April. How has this affected your business? How has this affected you personally? What challenges have you faced that you maybe haven't seen before? I just tried to take an interest in them. But yeah, empathy, emotional intelligence can be taught. Covey, for example, has some amazing courses that I used to license and teach. But again, it can be taught. It's not easy. It's not something like how to close, for example. Mm-hmm. So it also requires some coaching. And that's where we really need to spend some time, is helping those sales managers out there understand how to coach some of these skills.
Andy, how do you see it?
Yeah, I think it comes down to mindset, and the mindset that the company is helping the salesperson be in when they're going out to the field. I think if you're tone deaf to what's going on out there, and your sales manager is pointing to a bunch of KPIs and telling you to go push for the sale, then you're automatically not going to be as empathetic, because you're kind of hard-lined, hard-driven to go out to the sale. But if the tone that leadership sets is, hey, this is a real serious issue out here. Companies are affected. People are affected. Families are affected. Let's first try to understand how this is affecting their business, what they're dealing with, and how they're feeling. And then let's try to align ourselves in a way that's going to be able to help solve those issues. A good analogy, I guess, to say is like, sympathy, because there's especially on LinkedIn, you were seeing a lot of stuff like, don't sell now, don't sell, you can't sell right now, don't sell. And I was like, well, I just don't know how your business is going to stay in business if you don't sell, right? So I think that's more of being sympathetic. Sympathy, gets up on the bridge with a bridge jumper, stands next to them, and might even jump with them. And that's where I think, a salesperson with a sympathetic might walk away and say, hey, you're dealing with these issues, I'm just going to walk away, let you be, and I'll get back to you in 6 months. Empathy stands next to that bridge jumper on the bridge while trying to talk them down from it, right? So empathy is, hey, I understand what you're going through. A lot of people are going through this. I feel you, and I understand what you're going through. And this is where I think I can help you adjust and maybe grow out of this or change in some way that's going to help you with the challenges that you're facing. And I think that where the tone deaf and unempathetic person comes in is when they don't really care about how that person is feeling, and they're just trying to sell them something without being able to align to what their true feeling is. Back to one question you asked and we talked about earlier was, is this a teachable skill or not? And we're just talking about sales being a teachable skill overall. And I think the challenge that manufacturers and industry professionals have alike, and Mark touched on the fact that you can do an assessment to try and find the person who has these skills. I think far too often, and I don't want to offend any mechanics out there. I love my mechanic; they do a great job. But far too often, we try to turn mechanics into car salespeople just because they know everything about a car, and that doesn't necessarily work. I think you could take a salesperson though, and they might not be the most skilled mechanic, but you can give them a set of instructions and say, "Hey, this is how you fix these certain kind of things." So I think the product knowledge piece can be taught to a person who has those good, intangible, personable, emotional intelligence skills, that empathy. But the other way around, it's much more difficult to teach a person who has all that product knowledge, or an installer or a mechanic, those intelligence skills and those social skills to be able to actually sell.
Interesting.
And that's why I use an assessment. People are like, what do you mean, Mark? I told you I want you to teach my team virtual selling. And I says, well, this just was the discussion I had with the CEO this week. I said, how many people do you have? He says, 45. I says, okay, how do you know, without a doubt, every one of them wants to be in sales and they have the will to sell? Crickets. I says, how would you like to know? Because what I've done is, we had a very large team we assessed, and it blew me away. 30% of the people on their team shouldn't even be in sales. They dread it every day. And if you don't think that comes across on the phone, you're really mistaken. They're like methodical robots, right? Trying to close. So assess first. And then, like I said in prior discussions, if you really want to drive a salesperson nuts, make them take something they don't need. So what I'm about is, Andy's like, oh yeah, I've been there, done that. I have the t-shirt. But what you do is, what I call it is prescriptive training now. There's no excuse to make somebody sit through a course or take an online course they don't need.
Wow. Well, that's so true. And, I wanted to jump back, and we're getting towards the end here, so maybe we can wrap up with this. You were talking earlier, I believe Andy was, about the need to become a trusted advisor, right? And I think we all agree here that that's imperative right now. Do you feel that that is something that needs to be taught? I'm pretty sure the answer is yes, but is that something we can teach our salespeople, and maybe give our listeners some examples, if you can, of maybe it's already worked for you and you've tried it, or I don't know. I don't know if I asked that right, but
I'll take the lead there real quick. I think, and it kind of piggybacks off what I was talking about before, taking the mechanic, teaching them how to be a salesperson, teaching the salesperson how to be a mechanic. And I think for some reason, companies, and I understand that their training is all sales training, and you're hiring a salesperson, right? Hopefully, depending on your assessment on how well you've done that, or how well you've brought somebody on, but you're teaching a salesperson how to sell, and that's very important. But I think what is equally important is to come up with a training program that provides the business acumen and the industry experience to be able to have those conversations that's going to enable you to be a trusted advisor. because far too often sales organizations and companies and businesses, they hire recycled talent within that industry, or they take that installer or that business owner who it didn't work out for them, and now they want to get into sales or something because they think they have the business acumen, because they have that product piece down. They think they can teach them how to go and be a salesperson. But it's much easier, in my opinion, to take a person who is good at sales or has the ability to be a salesperson and develop a training program that gives them the industry knowledge and skills that you can look outside of your industry, bring them in, skill them up on the industry and in the business, and then they can go out and be a salesperson. So I think training programs designed around providing business acumen and industry knowledge to salespeople is critical.
Yeah, and I just want to continue on that thread. I think we've discussed. I was a training manager for a large industrial company, and what we found was a lot of the people going through the program had never had business training. They didn't know the difference between a balance sheet and an income statement. They didn't know what EBIT was. So what we ended up doing was, it was a stacked program. So first we introduced them to business terms and terminology and what you can get from them. Then we train them on things that impact cash flow, things that impact net income. Believe it or not, this particular company had 31 industries that they served. So we created training decks for 31 businesses. And I'll never forget the one for cement. When you make cement, if the cement line is down for an hour, it costs you $140,000 an hour. So this particular company sold bearings. And wait a minute. So my competitors' bearings have to be replaced every 6 months. My bearings have to be replaced every 3 years. Very quickly you can do a business case that says, wait a minute, how many times was the line down with them compared to me? What's the value of that? So really, we're talking about a bearing that cost $1.23 less than me, and you're beating me up for that when I'm going to save you $400,000? So that all can be accomplished if we give the salespeople the tools. Because believe it or not, they want to win. They really wake up every morning wanting to win. Most were athletes at one time. They're very passionate about wanting to win, but most times they're selling naked. They don't have the equipment, the training, or the tools. So all of this can be fixed.
You have to understand how your customers make money.
Yes.
If you're going to help them to make money. And if you can help your customers make money, then that's going to make you the trusted advisor that differentiates you from everybody else.
And one of the
dropped.
How do you follow that? I like being the data guy. And when you do win-loss calls, there's two common complaints buyers have. Is one, salespeople listen to reply, they don't listen to learn. But two, they don't understand the business of my business. So if I don't trust what they're pitching, the only thing I can look at is price. So I think, Andy's point is very well said.
Yeah.
Well, I'm sad to wrap up.
You're right.
We had a lot more.
Next episode.
Duh. Well, gosh, we can't thank you guys enough for hanging out with us today and for giving all of the manufacturing trailblazers, I didn't even talk today, trailblazers listening some amazing inspiration, education, ideas. It was fantastic. So thank you. And if anybody is interested, we will have information and quotes. Thank you, Andy, for that in the show notes. So please check that out. And if you're not already, please subscribe to this podcast. If you are and you like it, please leave a 5-star review, because that makes us happy and tells us that we're doing okay and to keep on going. And if you would, please share this with a friend or colleague, if you will, because not everybody gets as excited about manufacturing as we do. So, but sharing is caring, so we appreciate it. And I will let Mr. Zaganto take us out.
Andy and Mark, thanks so much for being with us. Everybody check them out on LinkedIn. That's how we met and found them, and our world is better because of it. So to our our loyal listeners, we are so glad you took the time to hang out with us today. You're important to us. We know you're out there, and we need you to keep manufacturing out loud because we do need you. Thanks, everybody. Talk to you soon.
Thank you for listening to MFG Out Loud with Ray Zaganto and Allison DeFore. You can subscribe and find show notes at mfgoutloud.com.